Today, we are going to dig into a really fascinating and honestly a pretty counterintuitive idea for how to finally build a national high-speed Maglev network in the US. And believe me, it starts in the absolute last place you would ever expect.
For decades, the whole idea around high-speed rail in America has been focused on connecting the big coastal cities, right? New York to DC, LA to San Francisco. It seems totally obvious. But what if that entire strategy has been completely backward this whole time? And what if the real answer, the key to unlocking the whole thing, was hidden not in the crowded, expensive coasts, but right in the heart of the country? All right, let's really get into this.
To understand this new plan, first we have to talk about the old trap. Why is it that starting a maglev line where the most people are, in those huge coastal cities, pretty much guarantees it's going to fail?
This quote from the source material just hits the nail on the head. If you start with the most difficult, most expensive, most politically tangled route you can find, you basically teach everyone that maglev is a slow, painful, ridiculously expensive failure before it ever even gets a chance to prove what it can do.
And listen, this isn't just a theory. Just look at the Baltimore to Washington project, 35 miles, for nearly $20 billion. That works out to over $500 million per mile. It's such an astronomical figure that, unsurprisingly, its federal grants got canceled. It's a huge, real-world warning shot.
So why is it so insanely expensive in cities? Well, it's because the physics of maglev are just incredibly demanding. This isn't just a faster train, you have to understand. It's a totally different kind of machine, and it has rules you just can't break. Okay, now what's really key here is the geometry. You can't just lay maglev track next to the old freight lines. Nope, it needs its very own completely separate path. And to hit those incredible speeds, it has to be almost perfectly straight. Any curves at all require a massive turning radius. We're talking 5 miles long. Now just try carving that through a dense city. It's basically impossible.
So, if the old way is a trap, what's the new way? Well, it actually comes from a pretty unlikely place, biology. This is what the source material calls the slime mold solution.
Now, this doesn't mean we're going to build a network that looks like some kind of blob. It's a way of thinking. See, slime molds are incredibly efficient at finding the absolute best paths between food sources. They naturally create networks that are cheap, fast, and super resilient. The point is, this logic helps us figure out the most critical trunk lines and the most important backup loops for a national system.
And this right here brilliantly shows where maglev really makes the most sense. For any trip under about 150 miles, just driving to the station and back takes up way too much of your total trip time. But for trips over 500 miles, a plane speed at cruising altitude eventually wins out. That sweet spot is right in the middle. So a national network shouldn't be one giant heroic line from LA to New York. It should be an overlapping chain of these highly useful 150 to 500 mile segments.
Okay, so let's put the pieces together. If we use that slime mold logic and we target that 150 to 500 mile sweet spot, well, the most logical, most rational place to start this whole thing isn't on the coast. It's in Nebraska.
The whole plan hinges on this brilliant two-part idea. You've got Omaha and Lincoln with a combined population of almost 800,000 acting as the public-facing front door for passengers. But the real secret weapon is North Platte's Bailey Yard, the largest rail yard in the entire world, which becomes the system's hidden machine room.
This is the unglamorous behind-the-scenes stuff that is absolutely essential to making it all work. Bailey Yard is already built for rail on a massive scale, so it's the perfect place for all the heavy industrial work, doing maintenance, actually manufacturing the guideway itself, running operations, training crews, everything. This is what makes a national system actually viable.
So with Nebraska as our anchor point, how does the initial network, the actual skeleton of a national system, start to take shape? Well, it gets built out in 4 very logical corridors.
First, and this is the most important one, you build the eastern trunk from Omaha out to Chicago. You have to do this. Without this link, the whole thing just stays a regional project. Chicago is the nation's historic rail hub. It's the critical hinge that connects the entire interior of the country to the east.
Next, you push west, from Nebraska out to Denver. This corridor is all about that clean geometry we talked about earlier. It's long, it's straight, and it's relatively cheap to build across the plains. This is the perfect launch pad to get you toward the Rockies and eventually the West Coast.
But a simple east-west line is fragile. It has a single point of failure. So applying that slime mold logic, you add a southern hinge running through Kansas City to St. Louis. This creates a resilient loop,
giving the whole network a backup path and a vital connection to the south.
And finally, you add the northern branch, running from that powerful Chicago hub up to the Twin Cities. And just like that, you have a true, four-cornered inland skeleton. It's strong, it's resilient, and it's ready to expand in every direction.
Okay, now for the question I'm sure every single one of you is asking. What on earth does all this cost? We have to be honest about the numbers here. They're huge. But the inland strategy makes them logical.
Yes, the total price tag for a full ambitious national grid could get close to $5 trillion. It is a staggering figure. But listen, the key isn't the final number. It's how you get there.
This slide right here tells the whole story. That failed urban project in the east cost an estimated $570 million per mile. The model for this wide-open inland skeleton? Roughly half that. So the most important takeaway is that where you build first is the single biggest factor in the cost. Starting inland is simply more rational.
And this is how you manage that multi-trillion-dollar cost. You don't spend it all at once. You build it in smart phases. The initial core skeleton we just mapped out is modeled at around $660 billion. You build that, you prove the concept, you start generating revenue, and then you expand, adding a Texas arc, and eventually building out the full national trunk line.
So really, it all boils down to these three simple laws. First, you design the network's shape, its topology, using that slime mold logic. Strongest trunks first, with resilient loops. Second, you respect the brutal, non-negotiable geometry of Maglev, build straight, and avoid the hardest urban areas at the beginning. And third, you phase the construction based on smart economics, build the cheapest, most effective corridors first.
And all this leaves us with a final, really provocative thought. Maybe the grand vision of American high-speed rail shouldn't start with some shiny, symbolic monument in a coastal megacity. Maybe, just maybe, it starts quietly, logically, and powerfully with an operational skeleton on the prairie. One that's built to work before it's ever built to impress.